Hey guys, how's it going? Toofty here, and today we're discussing the Demoman and we're arranging his weapons into tiers. We're going to be using a basic A to D grading system, except with the addition of an S tier at the top because it sounds fancy. I'm not sure of the exact origin of this additional S tier, but it's very commonly used in these kinds of discussions for other games, so we're going to use it here too. I think it possibly has a Japanese origin, and it probably stands for sexy, let's be honest. In the background, you're going to see me on Harvest, jumping about with the frying pan, having a bit of fun. So I hope you enjoy that whilst we go through this. So, first of all, let me tell you about why I wanted to chat about this. I saw a tweet from our best NG friend, Uncle Dane, a little while back, and he posted this table grouping all the engineer weapons into these 5 tiers. Now, we're not going to analyse this particular list in this video. We're going to be going ahead and looking at the Demoman, but I largely agreed with all the positions these weapons were in. There were 1 or 2 surprises for me. For example, the Rescue Ranger being quite low, and the Stock Wrench also being quite low in tier B there. But I completely trust Uncle Dane's judgment because, let's be honest, there's a chance he's a slightly better engineer than me. We don't know yet. It's not been scientifically proven. It could be true though. Anyway, that sparked my curiosity and my imagination, and so I decided to do the same exercise for the Demoman and his primary and secondary weapons. And this is what I came up with, and it sparked quite a lot of interest. Now, the more observant amongst you may have noticed that the Quickie Bomb launcher is not actually present. That's how god-awful the weapon is. I'm joking. I just forgot. I'm a terrible person. But we're going to look at this again in a bit more detail. But yeah, generally speaking, this sparked a lot of interest. People were commenting with their own opinions, and I thought this would make a really good video. And so we could do this and take a look at the other weapons for Demoman, and of course, how the list might change when looking at the Demoknight. If you are interested in making one of these yourself, then there's a link in the description to the website that Uncle Dane originally used. I myself just recreated the table in my own software. So, before we jump in, why is this interesting? Well, for starters, it will be really helpful for new players, right? Or even if you're new to a particular class, maybe you played the game for a long time and you thought, you know what, I want to try out Scout, or I want to try out Demoman. What's a good place to start? Which weapons should I be avoiding? And secondly, it's interesting to see which weapons probably need some kind of buff, hopefully in a future update. In my opinion, the most viable weapons for this guy in the most situations are the stock grenade launcher, the stock sticky bomb launcher, and I've popped the iron bomber in there too because I've done a lot of videos on that in the past, trying to figure out which is better, that or the grenade launcher, and there's not a lot in it. Both perform really well, depending on potentially your playstyle. You can do slightly better with one over the other. In the second category, I've put the Quickie Bomb launcher. This is another weapon that, in my opinion, is far too similar to the stock sticky bomb launcher. There are some small pros and cons, but largely you can get away with a similar amount of damage, and I might do a video in the future about this, but I would have thought that this is viable in pretty much most situations, although you don't see many high-level TF2 players using it, so I think there's probably a good reason for that. I think it's putting out slightly less damage. Next up is the Scottish Resistance and the Lock and Load. 2 weapons that I feel kind of just cramp your style a little bit. As it says here, they can be both viable in some situations. If you're playing very defensively on a very choky map, you can do a lot of work with the Scottish Resistance, for example. But in my opinion, for the most part, both of these aren't going to be as good as stock, and I've actually done a video about the Lock and Load recently. If you want to hear more of my opinions on that, I go through it in way more detail there. Next up, I have the loose cannon and the sticky jumper. The loose cannon, in the right hands, it can be lethal, but here we're just getting more situational. It basically provides slightly less reliable damage. You may have those crazy moments where you get like 2 double donks in a row and you're doing really well, but it's just that little bit more limiting, you know, in terms of range, hitting a scout really close up in your face, for example. It just gets a bit more restrictive. And I think with all these, in the right situation, one of these might be perfect, maybe the ideal weapon, but this is about talking generally in your gameplay throughout 10 games on 10 different maps, which weapon is going to be the most viable in the most situations. And of course the sticky jumper, although I love it, you're pretty much removing a huge amount of your damage as a Demoman. And finally the base jumper, yeah, it's a fun meme. But yeah, I was confident about 90% of this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And to be clear, it's okay to have some weapons that are situational. I think things perhaps in the D tier, that's where it starts to get a bit questionable and where a buff could be appropriate. But we'll come to that when we take a look at the melee weapons. So first of all, let's take a look at the melee weapons if you are playing as a regular Demoman. At the top we have the stock bottle and of course the pan, which is slightly overpowered, obviously. And then skipping over A, we then have the pain train and the skull cutter. The pain train can be very useful for capping quickly, obviously, and the skull cutter, it slows you down a bit, but it can do more damage, so it's a bit of a trade-off. Most of the time when you're in a melee situation, you want to kind of be moving quickly, but you know, it's debatable. I think it can work, and I think there are a lot of people who do enjoy using this weapon with their regular Demoman loadout. Okay, so the next items, I want to make this really clear. This is only the case if you're using the regular Demoman. We're going to come to the Demoknight in just a second. In my opinion, any weapon that has a perk that's only active when you have a shield, I think it's safe to say that those weapons are not going to be ideal for your regular Demoman. But please let me know if you disagree in the comments below. So I'm going to skip over these quite quickly. Some will work more than others. The half Sxottie is a pretty risky weapon, but could potentially work. But in my opinion, all these really aren't suitable for your regular Demoman. And of course, the Caber. Sitting down there in the D tier, that thing ain't going anywhere. Let's be honest, I think most of us would agree that this guy needs a little bit of a buff. At the very least, if when you collected an ammo box, it regenerated, that would be slightly better. Maybe you take slightly less self-damage with it. Just a couple of small tweaks to give the thing a chance. But anyway, let's move on to the final set, and this is where we take a look at the Demoknight. Now, please note for this exercise, I focused purely on the full Demoknight because it hurt my brain too much to think about both the hybrid and the full Demoknight at the same time. So the Demoknight's boots are going to be left in the table at the top, although I could have left them out because there isn't an alternative option. You kind of have to wear them if you're going full Demoknight. But I'm curious though, as we go through this, how do you think this might change if we were to think about the hybrid Demoknight? Would some weapons become more viable and some less? Again, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I feel a little bit bad here. I feel a little bit like a cop-out because on this top row, I'm putting every single shield. I've been trawling through the internet, trying to get opinions. I even put out a little vote on Twitter, and it seems like every single shield can be really viable in certain situations and with certain playstyles, and it kind of depends on the individuals, which I guess is a really good thing because it means they're very nicely balanced. They all do different jobs, and it's based more on personal preference rather than some kind of meta. There was some consensus over the Splendid Screen being the best shield because of that massive charge damage you can deal with it, but there was still a huge amount of you guys who loved the Charge and Targe and the Tide Turner. So yeah, as I say, I'm going to be a cop-out. I'm going to put them all in a row there and let you guys shout it out in the comment section below. So it's the same kind of situation with the melee weapons for the Demoknight. So again, I asked you guys to give me some help here, and in this case, it was a little bit more surprising. The Eyelander was hugely more popular than the other Demoknight weapons, with the Persian Persuader and the Cladhaimor being the least popular options. Now, I didn't make it clear as to whether I was talking about the full Demoknight or the hybrid. I guess getting your thoughts on either is fine for this vote. I know Solarlight is a massive fan of the Cladhaimor, particularly for the hybrid Demoknight. So based on that vote and my initial understanding, you could potentially argue that one or two of these melee weapons could sit lower down the list. But again, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below on this. I painted a picture here that says that all the Demoknight's melee weapons are beautifully equally balanced, but I'm sure that's not the case. So please, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Next up, we have the stock bottle. I feel like for Demoknight, it's probably still viable, but perhaps not as good as some of the other options. Then finally, we have the pain train. I feel like as a Demoknight, you're going to have to be quite tanky, so any slight damage vulnerability is not going to be ideal. And then of course, our good old friend, the Caber. There he is, sitting on his own. Oh yeah, and obviously the frying pan and the prinny machete, they sit on their own tier. It's called the God tier. It sits just above here. They're clearly overpowered, but it's fine. So in conclusion, I think Demoman is in pretty good shape really. There aren't too many crazy outliers other than perhaps the base jumper and the Caber. I'm quite confident with what I ended up for the regular Demoman, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially on the Demoknight. It kind of feels like pretty much every sword and shield has a place in the game and can be viable, especially with all the different combos you can do, mixing and matching items, switching up your loadouts. There almost always seems to be a way to make each weapon viable. A very quick thank you to end this video to Cyber Twin Gaming for the Dress to Kill minigun, the Legend of Bigfoot, and the Summer Claim check. And also a big thank you to all my Patreons as always. I very much appreciate your support, and thank you everyone else for watching. Come and join my streams if you don't already. All the info you need is down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
It.